My name is Katie. I am the community navigator at Roots Community Food Center.
And I'm Nicole Moorey, and I'm the Oasis facilitator also at Roots Community Food Center. And we'll be telling you more about what that means as we go.
So we'll just tell you a little bit about Roots and what we do and the different programs and services we have to offer. And we'll talk a little bit about aging in community and what that means to us.
And I'll add that, and so as you're listening to us talk about Roots, maybe think about if there's local organizations that are similar to offering what we offer.
We actually started off in 2008 as Roots to Harvest. We sort of our original working was engaging with youth who faced barriers in different areas of their lives, largely through education and employment. So older youth who maybe didn't have as easy of a time finishing high school or were facing barriers to getting a job because of involvement with the legal system, just different barriers that made getting their high school education tricky for them. So the original Roots to Harvest engaged those youth by urban farming. We would employ them for 7 weeks to do a program called Urban Youth Farm Program, and they would work on a garden site, an urban farm site in Thunder Bay, and grow food and harvest that food and process that food. And that program slowly grew into a second program called Show, and that program worked with a little bit older youth aged 18 to 30, doing similar work, but for a longer period of time at a different site. And that was sort of the main objective of what Roots to Harvest was. Always using food as a tool to connect different people together. So the community gardens were open to the public, but we used the gardens as a tool to engage with youth through employment, but also through programming and gardening and finding new ways to help them sort of engage in their community. When we established as a nonprofit in 2012, we really sunk into the education piece of working with youth. We went into schools and we were doing programs in schools. We still do that today, but that was sort of one of the early starts to getting us doing education. And that slowly led to us taking up the space that we have right now in Thunder Bay. We are located sort of in the city center. So we have a space established as an office space / kitchen space. So we used the kitchen space to bring folks in to do cooking programs and education programs, and then also operated out of this space and went out into the gardens. When COVID hit is when we kind of shifted our focus a little bit. And we worked really closely with community partners who were doing food advocacy and food access work. By doing that, we worked with them to establish sort of a demographic of people who were maybe experiencing more barriers and hurdles to accessing good food due to the pandemic and isolation, resources being cut off, incomes being cut off, and just a general fear and anxiety around leaving. One of the biggest partners that we had during that time was called the Dewdrop Inn, and it is a food access space that serves meals every single day, 365 days a year to the community. The executive director of that establishment took us aside and said, one of the biggest gaps right now is services for older adults. What can we do about that? And our response to that was to use food as a tool to connect with older adults. We began to create these sort of catered food baskets that we would hand out once a week to older adults who came to the Dewdrop Inn for meals. So every Wednesday, older adults could come to the Dewdrop and access this basket or bag of food that would be sort of catered to specific needs of older adults, taking into account that we were looking for access to maybe harder to get food like proteins. So it always included, some type of meat, usually milk, eggs, and then fresh produce, as well as a meal that was made once a week, frozen in individual packages to give out as well, so that there was sort of like a microwave meal that was made fresh and locally. At sort of the midpoint of the pandemic, we transitioned over to become Roots Community Food Center. Community Food Centers Canada is a bigger umbrella of different food agencies across Canada. There are 15 of us doing food advocacy and food access in their communities. Roots signed on because they fit a lot of our sort of ideals and morals around supporting our community and using food as a tool. And with that came a rebranding. So at that point, 2021 is when we became officially Roots Community Food Center. And at that time is when we really shifted gears to working more directly with older adults. So up until that point, we'd only really ever worked with youth. So that demographic of 16 to 30, and occasionally, middle-aged folks, somewhere between 30 and 40, sometimes. And so during the pandemic, we really shifted gears, became a community food center, and started working with older adults. January of this year is when we opened up our space as a community food center to also offer a bigger variety of different services. So one of the main things, this also came out of COVID, but it's changed a little bit since it's sort of started. In 2020, alongside the wanting to get food access out to the community, we opened up our first community food market. We purchased the food from a local wholesaler at wholesale cost and sold the food back to the community at wholesale or cheaper cost. We set up at a community in the north side of town to sort of alleviate some of the barriers of getting access to fresh produce. In January of 2023, this year, we opened up 2 other community food markets at our office location to sort of give a wider range of access to that market. We also have several markets that go out into the community to First Nation reserves. So we have one that is at Gull Bay First Nation, as well as White Sand First Nation. We are just the sort of middle person in that process. We just purchase the food, hold the food, and supply them with that food. They run their own markets, they do their own signups. Important to note is that the community food market is available to everybody. There is a food incentive program that you can sign up for, where you can also get your produce subsidized based on health concerns or family sizes. You'll work alongside a community health worker who will establish sort of what your needs are, and then you can get a gift card weekly to access that market for no cost. The markets in the communities are regulated by their own communities, so they have the same incentive programs, but more specific to their community. So that one runs 3 times a week right now at the 2 different locations. We still are in the north and the city on Tuesdays, and then at our office location on Wednesdays and Fridays. At the same time as 2 of our markets, the ones that are at our office, we have an older adults community meal. The community meal is made available to anyone who identifies as an older adult or senior or elder in our community at no cost. There is no sign up, there is no registration process. It is just a meal made twice a week, available to folks. The biggest piece of the community meals that we've learned and celebrated is that it's really actually become a space where folks just come to socialize. The meal is a bonus for sure, because it's usually delicious, or always delicious, I guess I should say. But it is provided to establish a sense of community in Thunder Bay. There aren't really a lot of resources that have been made available to older adults in Thunder Bay without being associated to some kind of organization or agency, or without having some kind of referral. This one is just open and available to everybody. And we run our market at the same time, so the folks that come for the meals can also access our community food market. So those are kind of the two biggest ones that are most specific to older adults right now, as our CFM and our community meals. They are based in the idea that aging in community is really essential. We have an older population in Thunder Bay, and having spaces that folks can not only access, produce, but also meals and getting out into the community and meeting new people is really quite important. So we're really proud and happy and honored to be able to be a space that offers that. Also new in this year, was it this year that Oasis was established? We joined with Nicole, well, not specifically Nicole, the Oasis program, and she'll tell you more about that. But that became a new project that we also began. I'll let Nicole tell you about Oasis.
Yeah, so around the same time as the community meals began, I began as the Oasis facilitator, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how that's evolving here. And as I share with you the specifics of my program, again, keep in mind how you can personally create well environment to age more healthfully in your neighborhood, because that's what the Oasis program is all about. It's supporting older adults to live a healthier life, I suppose, right within their own community. So this program started about 15 years ago in Kingston, and now there are 12 sites across Canada, and Thunder Bay just opened their first, and hopefully the first of many, sites here at the lovely Bayview Towers. And one of the reasons this place was chosen was due to the high percentage of older adults who live here. So prior to the Oasis program, it's not a long-term care home or a retirement community. It's just a naturally occurring retirement community. So maybe depending on where you live, perhaps you have older adults in your neighborhood, but that's not even a requirement. The whole idea is engaging with your neighbors to age more healthfully, which we'll talk about here. So the key elements of the Oasis program are that it's older tenant driven. So what that means is all of the ideas for the program come from the tenants. So we have lots of opportunity for them to share at planning meetings or just in day-to-day chats with me about what they would love to see happening in their building. And then I'm the one who helps them make it happen. And so typically we're working around these 3 healthy aging pillars. And so these have been determined to be 3 key areas that keep older adults the healthiest. So whenever you yourself can engage in physical activity, nutrition, and socializing, those are the top 3 areas that we're supporting through the Oasis program. I've already shared their on-site coordinators, me, just help keep things organized. And then the 4th element is that there needs to be a communal space to gather, to come together as a community. And so in our case, it's a whole suite. Essentially, it's like an apartment suite. But perhaps in your neighborhood, you can think of a communal space where you could easily come together with your neighbors. So just some ideas of things that we do. Like I said, nutrition is one of the pillars. And so Roots, being my employer, is an amazing asset to bring folks right here to the community meals. But we also do lots of things in-house, whether it's communal cooking and then sharing meals together, whether it's snack and learns, even snacks at coffee times, any little way we can integrate nutrition. We're trying to incorporate that, especially with the growing season coming. I look forward to see what comes from that. In the middle there, you can see one of the tenants painting vases, and this is part of our socializing activities. So anything from crafts or art lessons to coffee time. We have a book club. We put up a dartboard, just anything to bring people together to have conversations and socialize, which again is what we're here talking about, is just having that community that you can talk with. And then lastly, the physical fitness, whether that's exercising together or going out for walks. I love this day in the picture there. We were looking down at the steelhead fish in the nearby river. So again, fitness is a great way to keep yourself healthy for longer. And I'm sure you can imagine all the health benefits of socializing, fitness, and nutrition. But specifically, so far at other Oasis sites in other cities, they're seeing the tenants who participate in the program are 26% less likely to have to go to the emerge department, 40% less likely to be admitted to hospitals, 37% less likely to have an injurious fall, and 45% less likely to need to receive home care. So that's great, obviously. And we know it's great just from the health benefits that we see in the participants. And I love this quote, my common space that we use is in the basement, and more than one person have shared that the basement was always dark, and now that Oasis is in there, the lights are on. And so of course that's got metaphorical meaning to me too, that things are happening down there and we're busy making great social connections, which is what we'll be talking about next. But before we move into a bit of a how-to, just wondering if you could just take a moment and think to yourself, how could you age well at home with your neighbors? Is there anything that I've shared that kind of triggers an idea in your mind of something that you could try to just be a little bit more healthy and reap some of those healthy rewards that I've shared? Okay. So for this part, this is where we invite you to grab a piece of paper and a pen if you have that. We're gonna talk a little bit more practically, I guess, about growing community connections. And I think maybe to start it off, Katie's gonna share a little.
So something that we've started doing, which we didn't do before, but came from working with older adults, is opening up our space to volunteers. Really focusing on volunteers who are looking to have stronger connections with their community, and allowing lots of flexibility in how volunteers are in our space to ensure that we can meet them where they're at. So if that means that you can only come for a small period of time, you need to sit the whole time you are here. If there's restrictions that you might be facing, really trying to cater volunteering to allow folks to come as they are and be safe in the space, and also be able to engage with their community. So volunteers largely run our community meals. A good majority of our volunteers are also folks who attend the meals. So they will volunteer on the Wednesday for the dinner and then come and attend the meal on the Friday for the lunch, or vice versa. Also, we have some sort of curated meal prep times so that folks can come outside of the meal times and help prepare the food, but then come and enjoy the meal. So the purpose there is to also sort of incentivize having a connection to the folks who are coming through for meals, but also to Roots, so that you feel like part of the community, because that is the community. Roots is meant to be a community space that's accessible and available to all. So by engaging with volunteering, you are able to participate, but also receive, and it becomes a two-way street rather than just a constant give, which I think a lot of volunteers feel when they are spending a lot of their time giving and giving and giving, and there isn't reciprocity. That's one way that we have worked to try and grow community connections at Roots, is by welcoming in volunteers.
Great. So in your community, if you don't have a place like Roots, you must have a local volunteer center, or even informally helping other people is a great way to connect in your community. So I won't get too deep into this. We've already shared some of the health benefits of having social community, but indeed the research shows, as you already know, there's just so tremendous benefit in keeping connected with other folks, such as those things listed there. So that's why we are excited to do this little exercise, just to help you get to think a little bit about who are you currently connected to, and is there any way that you would like to grow your personal network? So before we do the exercise, I just wanted to outline these three key elements of connection. And through all these slides, when we do this little drawing that we're going to do, the three areas I want you to think about are, first of all, the quantity. That's all about the numbers of folks in your network. And so quantity could include either the number of people that are in your personal network, and it can also include how often you are connecting with other people. Now, keep in mind through all three of these areas, it's going to be individual to each person. Some people may need, very few connections. Others may feel healthier and more vibrant if they have many, many connections. So just want to reiterate that it's very unique to you and your personal needs. So that's what quantity is about. Quality, of course, is the quality of the relationship that you have. And so what we're talking about here is we're encouraging you to have connections with people that you feel like you're very supported by. So it's that feeling of support, but also how you feel around these people. So preferably hopefully you're feeling pretty good around these folks in your network. So that's what quality is all about. And then lastly is diversity. So in addition to how we usually think of the term diversity, defining folks of all types and backgrounds and so on, I'm also meaning, diversity in your life, like across all areas of your life, all types of interactions that you have in your life. So as we're doing this exercise, you can think about your family members, your friends, your neighbors, people you volunteer with. You can think about people that you're saying hello to in stores. You could think about maintenance people, like your plumber even. I think you get the idea. Any people that you're encountering, but it also includes non-humans. So it's really important too to feel connected to things like nature or your faith, your spiritual or religious faith, your pets, and yourself. These are all the connections that we're talking about. So now we get to do the art here. See how good you are at circle drawing. If you want to take out your piece of paper, this is what we're aiming for. It's pretty straightforward. The three circles with a line across the center. So I'll give you a minute to draw that. Okay, so you can finish drawing while I start to explain it. We thought this would be a nice exercise because after you put it up on your fridge and it can help you remember who you're currently connected with and maybe ways in which you want to grow your personal network. So we'll talk about the first top, the now half. This will be, I feel, pretty straightforward, but I'll just walk you through the steps of creating your own circles of connection. A few things to say first are what we want you to write on this circle are, those supportive, safe, and respectful connections and people that you have in your life. So in other words, we all know lots of people, in all areas of our life. And so the folks that I would love to see on this piece of paper are the ones that you feel safe around or good around, like your go-to people, I suppose. So the inner circle is just what it sounds like. These are your closest connections. So these people are the people that you deeply know and trust. And a good goal would be to have even just one person in each circle. So if you could think of somebody, a friend or family member, who you know quite well and you trust, that you could call in your greatest times of need, for example. So if you have one person, that's perfect. If you have a few people, you can add whoever you have in your circle there. And we're just getting you started today. You can take this away and finish it up later. Then the middle circle, I'm sure you can imagine, are those folks who are kind of in between. Maybe you have a little bit of knowledge, you know them pretty well, and you have, you trust them fairly well. You don't know them as well as your best friend, but these folks could be maybe your very good neighbors who you've known for a while. You don't know everything about them, but you feel really good around them. You feel like, you could trust them to a certain extent.
That could also be someone like a healthcare worker or like a social worker, someone that you share like deep and personal things with, but maybe not everything. Someone that you can rely on, but maybe you don't know as much about.
So again, hopefully you have at least one person there. And then the outer circle, of course, are the folks that you know the least, but you still have a sense of, like you still feel that to some degree you trust that they're probably good folks to be connected with. So these people you could either know a little tiny bit, or maybe they are strangers and you have no idea if you can trust them or not. You hope that you can. So it's easier to explain with examples. Maybe you have maintenance folks, like a plumber, somebody that comes and shovels your yard. Maybe it's the kid that mows your lawn. Like you have an idea that you can trust them with the task that they're there to do for you, but you don't really know, anything about them. They're friendly acquaintances. Maybe you're in a fitness class and these are the gals that you say hi to every week and you feel good around them, but you don't really know them. They still count as social connections. Okay, so hopefully you have at least one person per ring, and you can grow that from here. And if you want to get bonus points, at some point you even write their telephone number or like a way to easily contact them, so that in case of if you urgently need their support for something, you're easily able to contact them. Now, your homework to take away is to work on that second half of the paper. So having gone through this exercise, you may notice that maybe there's a few gaps for you. You would either need or want to have a few more connections. And this is where you sort of brainstorm of how you can add maybe at least one name per ring of new connections. So I'll just quickly share examples of how you could do that. So your inner ring, maybe there's folks that are currently in your middle ring that you really feel like, your friendship is evolving and growing, and that you could see that with a little bit more effort, they could become part of your inner circle. Or maybe there's an old friend who was in your inner circle. You haven't been in touch with them for ages, but just by picking up the phone and putting some effort into that friendship, they could become part of your inner circle. Well, I won't share examples for every ring. I'm sure you get the idea of, just give it a little thought of how, like who and how you could get a new name into each of those three rings to help grow your community. It's quite common among older adults, just through life's natural circumstances, that older adult social networks can shrink. And so if you're watching this and that's your situation, that's okay too. And that might be a time when you do want to meet a new person or two. Maybe you yourself doesn't need more connections, but you can play a role in helping other people to connect. If you are looking to expand your connections, these are some different ways that you could do it. We usually think of like the doing element, like what can I do? How could I connect in new ways? So Katie's already talked about volunteering. We've talked about the community meals, and just getting out into community organizations is a nice way to meet people. You could take a class, join a club. You could just sit out on your front stoop and just wave at folks that walk past. You could use technology or pick up the phone. It's probably easier for you to brainstorm things that you can do to grow your connections. But perhaps you think a little less about the other three areas. Being is on there because the point I wanted to share is you don't always have to do something to connect with a person. being yourself and just being present, you're able to connect. And so maybe this applies more to those non-human connections, like just sitting and appreciating something in nature and feeling connected to that greater good is one example. Just savoring any time that you're feeling joyful or peaceful, just pausing and enjoying that. Those are great ways to stay connected to yourself. If we want to share some ideas about thinking, sometimes the biggest barrier to us maybe are our unhelpful thoughts that we're having. So I won't get too deep into this one, but sometimes just changing your perspective on your social situation can make all the difference in the world. And so my main piece of advice here is just noticing if you're having those unhelpful thoughts about your social life, and maybe, just catching yourself and maybe noticing the more truthful scenario that you're experiencing. Or other ways are to potentially journal about, the negative thoughts that you're having, or talk with a friend about these unhelpful thoughts that you're having. Those are all healthy ways. Taking a walk, that's one of my favorite. Nothing will shift your perspective like going for a nice walk around the neighborhood. And that might have you thinking more helpful thoughts when it comes to socializing. And without getting too deep, we'll just finish up here on feeling. And so the point there is you can feel more connected by just slightly shifting how you're feeling about something. So that could be activating your 5 senses. So again, with the nature, going out, just smelling the spring smells in the air, or tasting a delicious meal and enjoying that. So soothing your 5 senses can be helpful in making you feel a part of something greater. Journaling, I've already mentioned. Having a good laugh or a good cry, just letting your emotions out. These are all healthy ways to connect with yourself. Okay. So to close things up here, these are like the pro tips. So just some final thoughts to take away. These are the 3 C's for community connection. So with conversation starters, my tip here is that whether you're the one trying to, work on a new friendship, or if you're helping another person become more connected, it can help to have a prompt, at the top of mind if you're kind of nervous about just doing this on your own. So saying something to another person, such as you could say to someone, "Hi, I haven't seen you in ages, so I just wanted to call and check in and see how you are." So that one, obviously, if you're kind of nervous about starting a connection, just having a 1-sentence prompt can be helpful, just to get you on the right track in terms of building that connection. The next point there, connecting to others. So this one is about, like we've already talked about, helping other people to make connections. And in particular, it can be great to connect others to different community agencies like ours, as an example. So my prompt for that one could be like, "Hey, have you heard of the Roots community meals? I was thinking of going. Would you like to join me?" Or however you want to phrase it. Have you ever considered going? It's Friday at 11 o'clock. So that's a little tip on how you can feel more comfortable to connect folks to services or to spending time with you. And then my last point here, creating healthy boundaries. This one, especially if you're helping other people with connections, it's really important that you're feeling good about how you're connecting. So the opposite of this is perhaps you don't have the space and the capacity to always be connecting and doing things with another person. And I'm here to give you permission that that's totally okay. It's okay to say no if you need to. If somebody wants to connect with you, you can say things like, "Oh, I would really love to, but I'm not available right now." would you be available, Friday at lunch? That's just one small example. Or, I personally can't help you, but have you heard of the such and such senior center? I know that they're offering that. Maybe I could give you their phone number. So again, I'm sure we all are familiar with what it means to hold boundaries. And I'm just reminding you that that's totally okay for you to do.